The appraiser put down his pen, looked around the table at my uncles and aunts and cousins, and said a number. And the room went so quiet that I could hear the ceiling fan. And then he said it again, more slowly, because no one had moved. And my Uncle Harish, who had stood in my grandmother's kitchen 6 months earlier and called the land worthless dirt and said giving it to me was the same as throwing it away, put his hand flat on the table and said, "How much?" The appraiser said the number a third time. 2 crore 40 lakhs. For land that my family had spent 6 months telling me was worth nothing. For land that they had allowed me to inherit because they had already divided the valuable assets among themselves and had handed me the remainder with the specific generosity of people who are giving away something they consider garbage. For land that I had, in 6 months, done something with. I looked at my Uncle Harish across the table. He was looking at the appraiser. He had not yet looked at me. I did not need him to. I picked up my tea, I took a sip, I set it down. And I waited for what came next. Part 1, The Grandmother and the Land. My name is Kabir Mehta, and I want to tell you about my grandmother before I tell you about the land, because the grandmother is the foundation of everything. My grandmother, Kamla Devi Mehta, was 81 years old when she died in November of last year. She had been born in a village in Haryana, had married young, had moved to Delhi with my grandfather in the 1960s when he had come to the city to work and had stayed for 60 years. She had built not in the figurative sense, but in the actual sense, with decisions and presence and the specific authority of a woman who understood that authority is demonstrated rather than announced. The family that now sat around tables arguing about what she had left behind. She had been my person. From the time I was a child, she had been the one who saw the real version, not the managed version, not the version calibrated to family expectations, the actual version. She had known things about me that I had not told her because she was the kind of woman who knew things without being told. She had loved me with the specific completeness of someone who was not loving a version of you but you yourself. When she died, she left behind a house in Delhi, fixed deposits, jewelry, and land. The house and the deposits and the jewelry were divided among my father and his 2 brothers, my uncles Harish and Devendra, with the smooth efficiency of a family that had been thinking about this division for years and had the legal framework ready. Nobody fought about the house or the deposits or the jewelry because everybody knew who was getting what and had made their peace with it. The land was different. The land was 18 bighas in a district of Haryana that the family had been holding for 40 years, agricultural land, acquired when my grandfather had thought about retiring to a village life that had never materialized. The land had been leased to a farmer for years at a rate that had not been revised in a long time, and that produced negligible income. The family regarded it as a legacy asset, something you held onto because you had always held onto it, and not because it was producing anything. The land was left to me, specifically to me, by name with a registered will that had been written by my grandmother 2 years before her death, and that had, in the handwriting of a woman who had studied only through primary school, but who had learned to write with great care, said, "The land in Haryana to my grandson Kabir, who I trust to understand what land is for." My uncles had not fought about this. They had, in fact, seemed relieved. Harish had said at the reading of the will, 18 bighas of agricultural land in that district. It hasn't appreciated in years. The lease income is nothing. It's basically worthless dirt. He had said it generously, as if he was explaining to me that I should not feel badly about receiving the lesser inheritance, as if he was being kind. "You can do what you like with it," Devendra had said. "Sell it if you want, you won't get much." I had nodded and said nothing. I had also, in my pocket, a letter from my grandmother, given to me by her lawyer at the private meeting that had preceded the family reading, a letter that had told me something about the land that neither of my uncles knew. Part 2, The Letter. My grandmother's letter was 4 pages long, written in Hindi in her careful primary school hand, and it told me the following things. It told me that she had been paying attention for 40 years, that she had been watching the district change. Quietly, in the background, the way the real changes happen before anyone official notices. She had been watching the infrastructure development, the road improvements, the small industries that had been coming in, the conversations her farmer tenant had been having with his neighbors about what their land was worth now compared to 10 years ago. She had talked to people, old women in the village near the land, the kind of people who know things because they have been in one place long enough to watch things change. She had asked questions over decades of visits that my family had stopped making because there was nothing to see there. She had understood something about the land that her sons had not taken the time to understand. She had written, "The land is not worthless. It has not been worthless for years. The family does not know this because they stopped looking. You are the only one in this family who looks at things completely. I am trusting you with what I know. Do the right thing with it." She had included, in the letter, specific information. The survey numbers of the land parcels, the name of the tenant, the name of a lawyer in the district who she had been in touch with, and a note, brief, matter of fact, that a highway project had been approved for the region 2 years ago that would, when complete, run within 3 kilometers of the land. The highway project that my uncles did not know about because they had stopped looking. I had folded the letter. I had put it in my jacket pocket, and I had gone to the family reading and listened to my uncle call it worthless dirt and had nodded and had said nothing. Part 3, 6 months. The 6 months between the will reading and the appraisal table were the 6 months that mattered. I want to tell you what those 6 months contained, because the containing is the story. I had taken 2 weeks off from my work. I was a landscape architect at a firm in Delhi, work that was both my profession and my genuine passion, the understanding of land and what you could do with it and what you owed to it, and I had driven to the district in Haryana. I had met the tenant. His name was Suresh, and he had been farming my grandmother's land for 22 years. He was a man of 60 who had the specific knowledge of someone who has been in one place for a long time and has been paying attention the whole time. We had talked for hours on my first visit, sitting in the courtyard of his house, drinking tea, while he told me about the land and the district and what had been changing. He confirmed everything my grandmother had said. The highway project was real and was progressing. The district was changing. Land values in the area had been moving for 2 years. There had been interest from developers, not aggressive interest yet, but the early interest of people who were watching a thing develop and wanted to position themselves correctly. I had then done what I did professionally. I had looked at the land, not just the legal survey. I had walked it, which took several visits, learning its topography and its soil quality and its relationship to the water sources and its orientation, and what it was and what it could be. I had looked at the surrounding area and the development patterns and the infrastructure and the specific geography of where the highway would run. I had talked to my grandmother's lawyer in the district. I had talked to a property specialist in the region. I had built a complete picture. And then I had made some decisions. The decisions I made in those 6 months were not dramatic. They were the decisions of a person who had been given something real and who was taking it seriously. I had revised the lease with Suresh, a conversation that had been important to get right, because Suresh had been on that land for 22 years and deserved to be treated correctly, and because treating him correctly was the foundation of everything else. I had revised the rate fairly, had understood what he needed and what the land could produce, and had arrived at an arrangement that worked for both of us and that formalized our relationship in a way that the previous informal arrangement had not. I had engaged the regional lawyer to review the land's legal status completely. All 18 bighas, every parcel, confirming boundaries and clearing a small dispute on one boundary that had been pending for years and that nobody had bothered to resolve. I had begun the process of understanding what the land could do that was not purely agricultural, whether there were elements of it that could be developed, whether there were uses that were appropriate to the land and the region, and that would not compromise what the land was. This was the work I did professionally, and I brought the same care to my own land that I brought to any client. And I had engaged a reputable appraisal firm to give me a current market valuation, incorporating the highway development and the regional changes and the cleared legal status and the formalized lease. The appraiser had come to the land. He had walked it with me. He had done his work carefully. And 6 months after my uncle had called it worthless dirt, he had sat at a table and said 2 crore, 40 lakhs. Part 4, ISHAN. I need to tell you about Ishan before I go further, because Ishan is woven through all of it, and I cannot tell the story of the 6 months without telling the story of who was in them. Ishan Rawat had been my colleague at the landscape architecture firm for 2 years. He was 31, 2 years younger than me, and had joined the firm after completing a fellowship in sustainable agricultural design, a specialty that was specific and important, and that had made him the most interesting new hire the firm had made in years. He was someone who cared about land in the way that you either do or you don't, the way that you either see it as a resource to be used or as something with a life of its own that you are in relationship with. He saw it the second way. In his work, this produced a quality that was different from most landscape architects: a patience with the land, a refusal to impose when the land had its own logic that deserved to be followed. We had worked on 2 projects together in his first year. The working together had produced what working together produces when 2 people think about things in the same way: a shorthand, an efficiency, and the specific pleasure of doing good work with someone who understands what good work is. He was also, and this had been present from the beginning and had been carefully filed for 2 years, someone whose company I valued in ways that went past the professional. Not dramatically present in the sense of a clear and immediate thing. Present in the sense of the specific quality of awareness you have when someone is in a room, the way the room is different when they are there. I had been filing this for 2 years with the specific discipline of someone who understands what the professional stakes mean, and who is not going to act on something without being certain. When I started making the trips to Haryana, I told him about the land. Not the full picture, the grandmother and the will and the letter. The land as a land problem, the kind of problem we both thought about professionally. I described it to him the way I would describe a project: the 18 bighas, the agricultural use, the regional changes, the highway development, the potential. He had listened, with the focused attention he brought to land problems. "Let me see it," he had said. I had not expected this. "It's not a project," I had said. "It's my personal land." "I know," he had said. "I still want to see it." And so, he had come on the 3rd trip to Haryana. Part 5, the land and the first trip. He drove with me from Delhi on an early Tuesday morning in January. The specific early morning of people setting out for a full day of work, the city still quiet around us, the highway opening up once we were past the suburbs. He was quiet in the car in the way of someone who is not performing comfort but is genuinely comfortable with silence. We talked occasionally about the land, about the region, about what I had found in the first 2 visits. He listened and asked precise questions, the kind that told me he had been thinking about it. We arrived at the land mid-morning. He got out of the car and stood at the edge of the first parcel and looked. He looked for a long time. "Walk it with me," he said. We walked the land for 3 hours. He had a notebook and he used it, not constantly, just when something required marking. He asked Suresh questions when we encountered him at the edge of the eastern parcel, and the questions were the right questions, the ones that someone who understood agricultural land would ask about the soil and the water and the growing patterns. At one point, we were on the slight rise at the northwest corner, the highest point of the 18 bighas, where the land looked out over the district in a way that gave you the full picture of the landscape. He stood there and looked for a long time. I stood beside him. The January air was cold and clean, and the winter fields were their specific color, and the sky was the wide Haryana sky that you do not get in Delhi. "Your grandmother knew what she was doing," he said. "Yes," I said. "She gave you the right thing," he said. "She always did," I said. He turned to look at me, not the professional look, something else. "You loved her very much," he said. "She was my person," I said. He was quiet for a moment, looking at me with the expression I had been filing for 2 years. "I can see that," he said. "The way you walk this land. You're walking it the way you'd walk somewhere that belonged to someone you loved." I looked at the winter fields below the rise. She understood things that the rest of the family didn't bother to understand, I said. She paid attention. So do you, he said. We stood on the northwest rise for a while longer. The January cold was around us. Neither of us moved toward the car. Part 6, the working together. After that first trip, Ishan became the person I talked to about the land. This was not planned. It developed in the way things develop when two people are thinking about the same problem and find that thinking together produces something better than thinking alone. He had opinions about the land and about what it could be and about how to approach the question of its potential without compromising what it was. His opinions were good. Not the same as mine, different in specific ways that were useful, that pushed my thinking past where it had been. We had 3 more trips over 6 months, each one productive in the professional sense, learning the land more deeply, talking to the regional people, understanding the development picture more clearly. And each one also something else, the something else that was present in the January morning on the Northwest Rise, and that was accumulating, visit by visit, in a way that I was continuing to file, but that the file was no longer quite holding. He was someone who was good with land but also good with people. He had talked to Suresh with the ease of someone who did not condescend and did not perform, just talked to him as a person who knew things and whose knowledge was worth taking seriously. Suresh had noticed this. He had said to me, after the second trip, "That one understands. Not everyone understands." He was also someone who was carrying something. I had known this since the second year of working together, the specific carrying of an unresolved thing that I recognized because I was carrying it too, in different directions but the same quality of weight. He had never said anything about it directly. I had not asked. We had both been professional about both things. The carrying was becoming harder to maintain. On the 4th trip, in March, we had dinner at a small dhaba in the district town after a long day on the land. The kind of place that has been there for decades, and that feeds you correctly and charges you nothing, and that is the best dinner available because it is entirely honest. We had been talking through the day's work, what we had seen, what it confirmed, what it changed. The conversation had the easy flow of two people who have been thinking together long enough that the conversation moves quickly and the understanding is assumed. At some point, the work conversation had finished, and we had been quiet for a while. He said, "Why did you invite me on these trips?" I looked at him. "Because you understand land," I said. "That's one reason," he said. "Yes," I said. "What's the other reason?" he said. I looked at my food. "The same reason I talk to you about things I don't talk to other people about," I said. "At work, the reason the working together is different with you than with anyone else." He was quiet. "Ishan," I said. "Yes," he said. "I've been filing something for 2 years," I said. "I'm aware that you know what I'm filing, and I'm aware that you're filing something too." He looked at me directly. "Yes," he said, both sentences. "The professional context is real," I said. "Yes," he said. "And I'm not going to do anything that isn't thought through," I said. "Not tonight, not impulsively." "I know," he said. "That's not what you do." "But I'm also not going to pretend the filing isn't happening," I said. "Good," he said quietly. We sat in the dhaba in March with the district town around us, and the 18 bighas somewhere in the dark to the north, and something between us that was not fully named, but was no longer fully unfiled either. Part 7, the appraisal. The appraisal had been my idea and my timing. I had scheduled it for June, 6 months after the will reading, and I had invited the family to attend. Not through announcement, through my father, who had conveyed the information to his brothers. An appraisal of the Haryana land. The family was welcome to come. They had come because they were curious. Harish and his wife. Devendra and his son Pranav, who was my cousin and who had always been the family member most like me in temperament, observant, quiet, not interested in the performance of things. The appraiser was reputable and experienced, and had done the site visit the previous week and had his numbers. The meeting was in my apartment in Delhi. This had been deliberate, not a neutral space, my space, The specific choice of someone who understood that context matters. I want to tell you what the appraisal meeting was like in the detail it deserves. The appraiser opened by reviewing the land, the 18 bighas, the parcels, the legal status. He noted that the boundary dispute had been resolved, which produced a brief confused look from Harish that told me he had not known about the boundary dispute. He described the agricultural use and the lease, noting that the lease had been revised to a fair market rate, which produced another brief look. Then he talked about the regional context, the infrastructure development, the highway project. He had a map showing the highway alignment and its proximity to the land. He had comparable sales from the region showing how values had moved in the past 2 years. Then he said the number. 2 crore 40 lakhs. The room went quiet. In the specific silence, I looked at my uncle Harish. He was looking at the appraiser's map. He was processing. His wife was very still beside him. Devendra had leaned back in his chair. Pranav, my cousin, had caught my eye across the table. His expression was the expression of someone who had been watching a thing develop and was now watching it arrive, and who was on the right side of it. How much? Harish said. The appraiser said the number again. That's the current valuation, the appraiser said. Given the highway development and the regional trends, the trajectory over the next 3 years is upward. If the commercial interest from developers continues. Commercial interest, Devendra said. There have been 3 inquiries in the past month, the appraiser said, consulting his notes. 2 from agricultural processing companies looking at the region, 1 from a hospitality group interested in rural tourism development. Harish looked at me. For the first time in the meeting, he looked directly at me. I looked back. You've been managing this, he said. Yes, I said. The boundary dispute, he said. Resolved, I said. The lease revision, he said. Fair market rate, I said. The developer inquiries, he said. I haven't responded to them yet, I said. I wanted the appraisal first. He looked at me for a long moment. Your grandmother, he started. Knew what she was doing, I said. Yes. Part 8, what Harish said. After the appraiser left, Harish asked to speak to me privately. We went to the other room, my study, the room I worked in when I was working from home, the walls with the landscape drawings and the books about land and soil and architecture that were the physical evidence of what I cared about. He sat in the chair across from my desk. I sat behind it. I called it worthless dirt, he said. Yes, I said. In front of the family, he said. Yes, I said. He looked at the drawings on my wall. I didn't know about the highway, he said. No, I said. I didn't look, he said. No, I said. He was quiet for a moment. Your grandmother looked, he said. She paid attention for 40 years, I said. She talked to people. She asked questions. She kept going back when the rest of the family had stopped going. He absorbed this. She gave it to you because she knew you would look, he said. Yes, I said. Not because it was worthless, he said. The opposite, I said. A long silence. I owe you an apology, he said, for what I said. I looked at him. The apology I'd like, I said, is not the formal one. The apology I'd like is for you to understand why she gave it to me specifically, not because she was being unkind to you, because she trusted me to understand what land is for. He looked at me. What is land for? He said. It's not for declaring worthless, I said. It's for understanding, for taking seriously, for doing the right thing with. He was quiet for a long moment. She wrote something in the will, he said, about trust. She wrote me a letter, I said, private, from her directly. What did she say? He said. I thought about it. She said she had been paying attention, I said, and that she was trusting me with what she knew. He nodded slowly. She always did know things, he said, quietly, not with bitterness, with the specific tone of someone who is recognizing something that has been true all along. Yes, I said, she did. Part 9, the distance. Here is the part that was not clean. After the appraisal, after the conversation with Harish, after the family had processed what they had been shown, there was a period where things with Ishan went differently than I had expected. The Daba conversation in March had moved something between us without fully resolving it. We had said things that were real and had returned to Delhi, and had continued in the professional context with the specific managed distance of two people who have acknowledged something and have not yet decided what to do with it. The appraisal had been a significant event. I had been absorbed in the preparation for it, and in the aftermath of it, and in the ongoing decisions about the land, the developer inquiries that needed responses, the strategic thinking about what to do next. I had not had the bandwidth to manage both things at full attention simultaneously. And Ishan had stepped back. Not dramatically, slightly. The texts about the land had become slightly less frequent. The conversations at work had the normal professional quality without the extra quality that had been there since the first Haryana trip. He had asked once how the appraisal had gone, and I had told him the number and the room going quiet, and he had said, "Good, your grandmother was right," and had not said more. I had let it go for 2 weeks. Then I had started to understand what was happening. He had watched me prepare for the appraisal. He had watched me manage the land situation, the professional competence of it, the legal work, the tenant relationship, the appraiser engagement. He had watched me navigate the family dynamic. He had watched all of this and had, I understood slowly, stepped back because he thought what he had been part of, the trips, the working together, the Daba conversation, was now over. That the land project had been the context, and the context had produced its result, and was now moving into a different phase that did not require the same proximity. He had, in other words, filed again. I had let it happen for 2 weeks. On the 3rd week, I went to find him. Part 10, what I said. He was in the site analysis room at the firm, a dedicated room with the large tables and the natural light that the firm had built specifically for the detailed work of laying out land data. He was alone, working on a project that was not mine, absorbed in the topographic data with the focus he brought to things that required it. I came in and closed the door. He looked up. "Kabir," he said. "Ishan," I said. I sat across the table from him. He had straightened from the work, but had not fully moved from it, the posture of someone who is not certain what is happening and is maintaining a position. "You stepped back," I said. He was quiet for a moment. "The land project reached a point," he said. "The appraisal was done. The next phase is strategic and legal and—" "That's not why," I said. He looked at the topographic map in front of him. "The Daba," he said. "Yes," I said. "I said things that I wasn't certain I should have said," he said, "in a context that was—" "Real," I said. "Yes," he said, "real." "Ishan," I said. He looked at me. "The professional context is still real," I said. "I'm not going to pretend it isn't, and I'm not going to do something that doesn't think it through properly. But stepping back is not thinking it through. Stepping back is the same thing I've been doing for 2 years, and I've decided that 2 years of that is long enough." He was very still. "What are you saying?" he said. "I'm saying the filing is done," I said. "Not impulsively, not without thinking about the stakes. I've thought about the stakes. The professional stakes are real and they can be managed correctly. What I'm not willing to do is manage the other thing by pretending it doesn't exist." He looked at me for a long moment. "You're certain," he said. "Yes," I said. "The work," he said. "The firm, the projects we've done and the ones we're going to do are all real," I said, "and are not incompatible with this if we're both honest about what it requires." He looked at the topographic map, then at me, then back at the map. "Your grandmother trusted you with the land," he said. "Yes," I said. "Because you understood what land is for," he said. "Yes," I said. He looked at me. "I want to understand that too," he said. "The full version of understanding it, not the professional version." "The full version is what I'm offering," I said. He was quiet for a long moment. Okay, he said. Okay, I said. Part 11, the land in July. We went back to the land in July. Not for work, for the first time, not for a specific professional purpose. Just to go. I had been making decisions about the developer inquiries and needed to see the land again before finalizing my thinking, but that was the occasion rather than the reason. Ishan drove this time. I had offered and he had said let me, and I had let him. The July drive through Haryana was different from the January one. The landscape in its summer version, the fields green and dense, the sky the specific July sky of the North Indian plains with its particular weight and color. Suresh met us at the land. He had been expecting me. I had called ahead, and he had his son there too, a young man of 20 who was going to take over the farming eventually, and who had, over my visits, become quietly interested in the conversations about what the land was and what it could do. We walked the land for 2 hours. Ishan and I moved through it with the familiarity of people who had walked it 4 times before and who knew its features and its logic. The northwest rise, the eastern parcel where the soil was different, the corner where the water ran in the rains. At the northwest rise, we stopped. July is a different kind of beautiful from January. The rise looked out over green rather than brown, the sky full of the monsoon's approaching presence. The distance was softer. The land was more alive. "What are you going to do?" he said. "Not sell," I said. "Not yet, not to the commercial developers." "The hospitality group," he said, "the rural tourism inquiry." "I want to think about that more carefully," I said. "Whether there's a version of development that honors what this is." He looked at the land below the rise. "There might be," he said, "if you do it right." "I'll do it right," I said. "I know," he said. We stood on the northwest rise in July, with the monsoon sky above us. "She would be glad you kept it," he said. "Yes," I said, "she would be." "She trusted you with it," he said. "You're doing what she trusted you to do." I looked at the land, 18 bighas of Haryana that my family had called worthless dirt, and that was none of those things. That was the thing my grandmother had understood it to be. That was what I was learning to understand it to be. "She said the family didn't know because they stopped looking," I said. "You didn't stop," he said. "No," I said. "You never do," he said, "not about the land." I turned to look at him. He was looking at me with the expression that I had been filing for 2 years, and that was, on the northwest rise in July, not filed at all. "Neither do you," I said. Part 12, what the land became. 8 months after the will reading. I want to tell you what the land became, and what the life became, and what the appraisal table meant in retrospect. The land is still mine. I have not sold it, and I am not going to sell it on the terms that were available, the commercial developers who wanted to do things to it that the land did not deserve. I am in conversation with the hospitality group about a version of rural tourism development that is honest to the landscape, something that brings people to the land rather than replacing the land with something else. Ishan is involved in this work. The professional involvement is real and is producing good thinking. What it is mixed with is also real and is producing something else. My uncle Harish called me in July. He had been calling more regularly since the appraisal, the specific changed quality of someone who has understood something that rearranges how they see you. He called to ask about the land, what I was doing with it, what I was thinking. He asked real questions. I gave him real answers. At the end of the July call, he said, "She was right about you." "I know," I said. "I should have paid more attention," he said. "To the land, to you." "You can start now," I said. "That's what starting is for." He was quiet for a moment. "Yes," he said. Ishan met my parents in August. This had not been planned. My parents had come to Delhi for a visit, and we had all had dinner together, the kind of dinner that families have when the family is in the process of adjusting to new information about one of its members. My father had asked about the land. He had heard about the appraisal from Harish and had questions. Ishan had talked about the land with the fluency of someone who had walked it 4 times and who understood it. and my father had listened with the interest of someone who had not expected this conversation, but was finding it genuinely interesting. My mother had been quieter. She had watched. She had the quality of a woman who is assembling a picture from available evidence and is nearly finished assembling it. After dinner, when Ishan had gone, she had said, "How long?" "How long what?" I said. "How long have you known him?" she said. 2 years as colleagues, I said. 8 months more fully. She had nodded. "He understands the land," she said. "Yes," I said. "Your grandmother would have liked that," she said. I looked at my mother. "Yes," I said, "she would have." She patted my hand once and went to help with the dishes and said nothing more. My grandmother's letter had said, "You are the only one in this family who looks at things completely. I am trusting you with what I know." I had looked at the land completely. I had walked it and learned it and understood it and done the right things with it. 2 crore, 40 lakhs. Not the point, but also not nothing. The evidence that she had been right about what she knew. And I had looked at something else completely too. 4 years of looking, 2 years of filing, 6 months of Haryana and Northwest rises and Dabas in March, and the site analysis room at the firm and July monsoon skis. The filing is done. The land is not worthless dirt. It is 18 bighas of Haryana that my grandmother understood and trusted me to understand. And the person who walked it with me, who asked Suresh the right questions and stood on the rise in January cold and March warmth and July green, and who said your grandmother trusted you with this, is here. She gave me the right thing. She always did. Clapperboard final hook. My uncle called it worthless dirt, and the family moved on to the things they considered valuable. My grandmother called it something else. She called it trust. She had been paying attention for 40 years while the family had stopped looking. She had talked to people and asked questions and made trips that nobody else made, and she had understood what was happening to the land around her land, and she had written it down in 4 careful pages and given it to the only person in the family who she trusted to look at things completely. 6 months later, the appraiser said 2 crore, 40 lakhs. The room went so quiet you could hear the ceiling fan. My uncle said, "How much?" I picked up my tea and said nothing. Because the number was not the point. The number was just the proof that she had been right. About the land and about me and about what land is for and about what trust is for. The land is mine. I am keeping it. We are building something on it that honors what it is. And the person who walked it with me, who understands what land is for in the same way I understand it, and who stopped filing at the same time I stopped filing, is going back to the Northwest, rise with me in October when the harvest season changes the landscape into the last color before winter. She trusted me with what she knew. I am doing the right thing with it. I think she knows. If this story found something you needed, if someone once trusted you with something the rest of the family called worthless, like it, share it with someone who is still holding something that hasn't been valued yet, and subscribe. Tell me in the comments, has someone ever trusted you with something that turned out to be worth more than anyone knew? And one last question. In October, when we go back to the Northwest Rise for the harvest season, there is a conversation that happens on that rise. A conversation between Ishan and me that I did not plan, and that he did not plan, and that happens because October light on Haryana fields does something to people who are paying attention. And something is said that changes the shape of what the land means. Should I tell you what was said? Part 2 is coming. Eyes. Subscribe. You will not want to miss it. The Revenge Chronicles.